Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us here on a Tuesday for another edition of our Weather Impact Show. I'm meteorologist Aaron White, and it's been pretty quiet here really the last several days as we've been tracking a lot of sunshine. Of course, we got the warm temperatures back up into the 80s here today, just like we saw yesterday after a nice little taste of fall just a couple of weeks ago when we had those highs in the 60s and 70s. That was a nice break. We're back to summer for this week, as we are still, of course, in summertime until we get into next week with the first official day of fall coming up on Monday, the 22nd, as we bring in the fall season. Eventually, we will bring in some cooler conditions and finally some rain chances here as we head into next week. So let's go ahead and dive into the forecast here, as of course we are counting down until fall beginning 6 days from now. Average high is 76 degrees, and then 45 days from now we're all ready to Halloween, and the average high is down into the upper 50s. And then by Thanksgiving, we're seeing average highs into the upper 40s. And 100 days from today is Christmas Day, where average highs are down into the upper 30s. But a long ways from now until we have to deal with those colder conditions and, of course, some snow. Don't have to think about that for right now. It is nice and warm here this afternoon, not thinking about the snow. 85 degrees current temperature with a partly cloudy sky here across central Ohio. Really quiet conditions, warm temperatures. Humidity has been relatively low. It has started to creep up a little bit here the last couple of days, and we will see at least a little bit higher values going into the weekend. Now, it's not going to be anything like we had over the course of June, July, and August, where we had those dew points up into the 70s. That's not happening, but dew points rising into the upper 50s, potentially to the lower 60s. That's going to help fuel our next chance for rain as we look ahead to Sunday and potentially some more rain going into next week. But for right now, it is dry, it is warm. We're still tracking those drought conditions here across the region. We got temperatures in the mid 80s here across central Ohio. 85 in Columbus, we got 84 there in Chillicothe, and really temperatures are pretty warm for most of the area. And as we go through the course of the rest of today, we will stay into the 80s here through this evening, at least the early part around 7 p.m. Temperatures will gradually cool off down into the 60s here later on tonight, and we may briefly dip into the upper 50s here for the overnight hours. So it will be cool, but maybe not quite as cool as we've had here in the last couple of weeks, where some mornings we were down into the 40s, but upper 50s are in the forecast here for tonight. Now, what we are also tracking are a few scattered clouds here this afternoon, all of it really moving in from the east, actually kind of opposite of where we normally see our weather moving from west to east. We have a system that is really on the coast right now, the mid-Atlantic coast, and that's just sending some clouds back to the west as it's just kind of sitting and spinning there, bringing some heavy rainfall across parts of North Carolina and Virginia. We're just getting cloud cover. We're not going to see any rain with that system, but it will keep the clouds around here going into your Wednesday. And one thing to keep in mind with the cloud cover here tomorrow, if it does linger a bit longer here through the day, it may keep our temperatures down a little bit into the lower 80s for some areas, especially here east of I-71. But I think most of us will still get into the mid 80s, and areas further to the north and west, Marysville, Bell Fountain, maybe upper 80s in the forecast here tomorrow, where we have more sunshine around here across the day on Wednesday. But as we go through the rest of the week, we are tracking more sunshine here by Thursday and Friday, and those temperatures really do start to rise into the upper 80s, and we are calling for 90 here for a high temperature looking ahead to Friday as we wrap up the week. So it is still summertime, and it's going to be pretty warm here for those high school football games coming up on Friday. Now, I do want to talk about the drought because this is something interesting here as we look back at the month of August. It was the driest August on record for the whole state. When you look at the state of Ohio altogether, it was the driest on record, and those records going back to 1895, so more than 100 years. Now, in Columbus, it was the 5th driest on record. And drought conditions are actually affecting more than 3 million people in Ohio, and likely going to see these drought conditions persist through the rest of September, as we're not really seeing any indications of a lot of rainfall. We have a couple systems coming in early next week, one chance on Sunday, another chance on Tuesday. And when we look at this, where you see that blue indicating a half an inch of rainfall we would like to see more of that purple and red showing up where that is indicating 1 to 2 inches of rainfall, but we don't have that through the next 10 days. So it's going to be some time, and that likely means the drought conditions are going to persist through September, potentially through October. But hopefully, again, we do get some moisture in here, some systems rolling through that will bring us some rain, and hopefully maybe at times in after all the crops get harvested. Of course, the farmers like to not have any rain so they can get the crops harvested. So that's the one good thing about the dry conditions that we have right now, is the harvest season will be underway here over the course of the next several weeks. But some rain, even during the overnight hours, would be good. And we have that chance coming up here again on Sunday. But looking ahead to next week, Monday looks dry, but there is going to be a better chance of maybe some widespread rainfall as we look ahead to Tuesday. This is going into Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, where we could see some showers, maybe some thunderstorms bringing some rain across a large part of Ohio and even into parts of Pennsylvania and West Virginia, because the drought conditions do expand outside of our state and we could use that rain. So we'll be watching that system here closely as we look ahead to next week, as we again officially start fall here on Monday. Now, of course, we are also tracking those above normal temperatures with highs in the 80s really through the next several days as we look ahead to our 7-day forecast. We got highs around the 80s going through today, tomorrow, Thursday, and then Friday. We got sunshine. We have 90 degrees for a high temperature here as we wrap up the work week. Then looking ahead to the weekend, still pretty warm on Saturday. So if you have any plans here for the start of the weekend, not looking too bad. And honestly, most of the day Sunday probably will end up being dry, but we are going to have to watch that chance for showers and a few thunderstorms rolling through as we go towards Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Could even see that continue into Sunday night. And like I mentioned, we'll catch a break on Monday, but Tuesday, even though it's not here on the 7-day forecast, Tuesday, that's the day we're going to be watching, Tuesday into Wednesday with that potential system. It is still several days out, so things could change. Just keep that in mind. But it's at least something we're keeping an eye on the radar and keeping an eye on that system, because it would bring us some beneficial rainfall if everything plays out as it's looking right now. So kind of fingers crossed on that one, because again, we need some rain. Now, as we just kind of shift things up a little bit here, this is actually a little bit interesting thing that's actually happening in California. Researchers from UCLA, the engineering school there, along with the Bay Foundation, are using pink dye to study water quality in the area. This is a fluorescent dye which has been used by researchers for many years to understand water movement and will disperse the the dye itself to just kind of have an idea of how the water moves, just different currents there. And now this does not pose any risk to people, animals, or vegetation, according to a release from UCLA News. Now, the initial window of the pink water was on Monday, with the highest visibility occurring between 8 and 9 in the morning. And they are going to be conducting some other experiments later in September, around the 22nd to the 24th, and then coming up on the 30th, weather permitting, just to, again, get an idea of things going on there in the Pacific Ocean with those water currents and water quality as well. Now, as we shift things up a little bit too, as we look back in 2024, of course, we were talking about Hurricane Helene and just how devastating that hurricane was, and recovery efforts continue across the Carolinas. Now, following some of that devastation from Hurricane Helene, the hurricane hit last September, claiming at least 250 lives and causing an estimated $47.5 billion in damage. But there is still work to be done. On Monday, North Carolina's governor asking the federal government for more assistance.
HUD has been a good partner to North Carolina, and I want to build on that success. That's why I am requesting $8 billion in CDBG DR grants to help us get the job done here in Western North Carolina.
Now, last October, the state held a benefit concert to raise money. Nearly $25 million was distributed to charities across the region. But now that money is drying up and nonprofits across the region are asking for help to continue with the recovery. Julie Kay with our sister station in Charlotte has more.
Hanging on these racks, Brian Hall sees more than just winter coats.
Prom dress, express.
For many, they're everyday things, but to families recovering from a life-altering storm, they're everything.
At least I don't have to worry about school supplies because I need to pay the rent, I need to make sure we have food.
Hall is the executive director of Eblin Charities, one of 5 organizations who received funding from Concert for the Carolinas. Their $3 million share helped them expand relief efforts into the hardest hit communities, like down the road in Mills River.
Millions of pounds of food was completely lost.
Micah Chrisman from Manna Food Bank remembers the damage well. The storm completely overtaking their old facility right next to the Swannanoa River. They were already planning to move buildings, but the $3 million they received helped replace everything inside.
Trash cans to forklifts to pallet jacks.
And just in time.
In June alone, we had our highest record of people visiting our pantries than we've ever seen in our 42-year history.
While Hall and Chrisman are grateful for the concert funds, it can't stop here.
The concert money came in, the concert money goes out.
Both operations now hanging on everyday generosity.
A miracle and a nightmare kind of situation.
So they can bring their communities small but meaningful moments of normalcy.
Turns into a Christmas wonderland.
In Asheville, Julie Kay, WCNC Charlotte.
And of course, Hurricane Helene was devastating across a large part of the region, affecting North Carolina and many areas along the mid-Atlantic coast. And now, thankfully this year, we're not tracking as much activity, at least right now. We are in the peak of hurricane season. The official peak happened on September 10th, so we are still around that time. And we're starting to see the tropics getting a little bit more active. They've been rather quiet since Hurricane Aaron. Again, that did cause some swells, some high surf and rip currents, and even some beach erosion along the mid-Atlantic coast just a few weeks ago. But then it's been quiet, and now we are starting to see a little bit more activity. We have some activity there in the eastern Pacific where you see that red highlighted area, more than a 60% chance of development here over the next several days. And then this area in red, this is actually highlighted with a 90% potential of development in just the next 48 hours. So likely to see that continue to develop and probably strengthen, and that could become our next tropical storm. So going to be watching that. Right now, indications are with the system really staying out over the Atlantic. It is going to be making its way towards the west and northwest, and we'll have to watch it. But usually when these systems get out towards this area, like we saw with Hurricane Aaron, they will start to curve more towards the north and just kind of stay out over the open water, over the open ocean, but still definitely something to keep an eye on here because it's going to be really developing here for the next several days and going into next week when we'll have to watch it as we get closer to the areas north of the Caribbean, north of Puerto Rico, and then getting closer to at least being nearby and having some effects with high surf and rip currents. And then there's another little system, actually a little tropical wave just moving off of Africa that does bear watching. Right now, the chances with that one are relatively low, not zero, about 10 to 20% for that one. But that other system with the red, that would be our next tropical storm, and that is Gabrielle. That would be developing again with that potential here over the course of the next 48 hours. So we'll be watching that one closely, and then we go down the list. So it has been relatively quiet, at least compared to other years where we've had many named storms up to this point. One of the more active ones was back in 2020 when we actually finished off this entire list of names going all the way through W and going actually into the Greek alphabet. So I guess that is one good thing about the tropics this year is that things have been pretty quiet for the most part. There has been some activity, and some of that again does bear watching here for at least the next short while. But we're also watching things around here. Again, things are pretty quiet as we look live right now over downtown Columbus. We got partly cloudy skies, temperature at 85 degrees, nice and warm here. Again, it is still summertime, still talk about the warmth, still talk about temperatures in the mid 80s and getting closer to 90 degrees here as we head towards Friday of this week. So that'll do it for us here for another edition of our 10 Weather Impact Show. Coming up later on this evening, Chief Meteorologist Aaron White will be in for the 4, 5, and 6, talking about that next chance for rain that we have here on Sunday, and then also looking ahead to that chance that we have going into Tuesday of next week. So until then, you can catch more news and weather online at 10tv.com.